I hope everybody's doing okay and enjoyed the conversations. I was out talking with Don about UC Boulder system that they run, they just do such great stuff. So I'm excited to welcome our next speakers. We have Elissa Falcone from the University of Toledo, Jonathan Grant from King's College in London, and Lauren Wolk from Interfolio. And their title is, give me 10 seconds, Maximizing Faculty Data with a Faculty Information System. So that, Toledo, University of Toledo. Sorry, Elissa. I was like, I've never heard of that university. Hey, listen, you know, when you bring in the B team for moderator, this is the best you get. So
sounds very interesting. I wish I knew where that was.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining us. And anytime you want to take it away, go right ahead.
Thanks so much, Bruce. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay. So thank you so much for joining us today for this discussion on maximizing with the Faculty Information System. My name is Lauren Wolk. I am a Senior Project Manager here at Interfolio, and I have the pleasure of hosting this conversation today with our esteemed guests. First, let me introduce Elissa Falcone, who is an Academic Project Manager at the University of Toledo, supporting the Academic Affairs Office and the Office of the Provost. The University of Toledo has been using Interfolio's Faculty Activity Reporting module since 2012. Our next guest is Jonathan Grant, who is a founding director of Different Angles, senior advisor to ResearchFish, professor of public policy at King's College London, and author of the forthcoming book, The New Power University, The Social Purpose of Higher Education in the 21st Century. It's available in the UK next week, in the US in about 6 weeks. Welcome, and thank you both for joining us today. Just as we get started, let me go a quick grounding to our conversation and introduce the Faculty Information System. At Interfolio, our experience sets us apart. We've been thinking about best practices for the struggles the faculty face for over 20 years. And as such, we have developed best practices, technologies, and support solutions that address the needs of faculty and academic staff. Interfolio's Faculty Information System, or FIS, is a platform that offers academics and institutions of higher education support for the entire career lifecycle. As we like to say, from hire to retire. Let's segue into our digital roundtable with our speakers. First, Jonathan, why don't you start us off? What is the current global approach to faculty impact at higher education institutions?
Well, thank you very much, Lauren, and it's a great pleasure to be here this afternoon. I think the first thing we have to do is to define what we mean by impact. And I think in a traditional sense, faculty information systems have looked at impact on and within the academy through the measurement, for example, but oversimplistically, of publications, of citations, of grant income. What I'm really interested in and what motivates my research is the social impact that faculty have through their research, through their education, and actually through their service contribution. And when I talk about social impact, I talk about impact that is outside the academy and therefore is having a direct impact on societies and the communities within which universities and faculty serve. And what I would like to see is that we start to include that societal and social impact on recruitment, promotion and tenure processes as we go forward. If we look around the world and take a sort of global view of that issue, I think the first point to make is that both countries and institutions within countries take very varied approaches. There is no standard model at this time. In countries such as Australia and indeed in the UK, where I'm located, There are government-led levers around research funding that have shifted the focus onto that societal impact, the impact that faculty have on broader communities. And those national level sort of interventions are starting to filter into hiring and firing decisions within universities. But I wouldn't say that that has been wholly adopted across the board. And then my final comment on this is that I really do believe, and indeed the book that you mentioned at the outset makes this case, that this is all about the social purpose of higher education institutions and how they serve their communities. And we have to align those academic incentives with those social purposes. And that's a challenge, but a necessary challenge.
So much. Thanks so much for that answer. Elissa, that background was really helpful talking about kind of the big picture of it. Can you speak to how the University of Toledo collects and showcases faculty work?
Sure. We have had faculty activity reporting in our bookshelves, virtual bookshelves, but we've only really gotten a handle on it within the last 4 or 5 years, where we're trying to collect this data on faculty that are doing really good work and house it somewhere so that we can make use of it. And that use section is a lot of different ways. We use it for the traditional evaluation purposes, including promotion and tenure, but we're also talking about showcasing the work in public-facing databases, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But some of the ways that we collect information, and we always want to try and make sure that if we're utilizing something on campus, we're going to take that and we're going to feed it into our system. Kind of the backbone of this is trying to make sure that faculty have a positive perspective on it. And in doing so, we're going to take whatever authoritative data source that we have on campus and utilize that information. So for example, would be tracking grant activity. The Office of Research and Sponsored Programs right now has a singular data source where they're collecting that information. And so in making sure that we're utilizing faculty time, we take that and we load it automatically into the faculty activity reporting system. That's one less thing that faculty have to remember to enter, but it also makes sure that that source of truth is housed within that office that does that work. Similarly with teaching, we can load that automatically for faculty. And so again, I'm going to sound redundant, but we're trying to take whatever data, authoritative data we have and load it into the system there. That way, if there is something that needs to be fixed, it can be fixed at the source and then reload it. That way that there is that source of truth for our data. Everything else then is entered by the faculty. And again, in terms of making it meaningful, we're really hoping that faculty continually update their information as they're doing something, whatever that something might be. And we found it to be really helpful that this kind of levels the playing field for faculty. And so they can enter their work and it looks very similar to somebody in a non-STEM field to those that are perhaps in a more STEM heavy, so that all of their information is presented similarly to whomever may be looking for it.
Awesome, thank you so much. That's a perfect transition into really what are your goals with the information that you're collecting? What are with the faculty information system?
I think one of the goals that we didn't even know that we had was increasing collaboration among faculty. Something that's really cool about the software that we use is that while faculty are entering their information, key phrases or tags are entered by themselves, and that is readily available for other faculty to search for from that homepage. And so we've increased collaboration between all different colleges and departments. We are housed on a couple of different campuses, and traditionally, if you're not near somebody physically, that really is a barrier to getting to know what other collaboration and interests faculty have. So this has also just been another really meaningful tool that we didn't even anticipate really liking. And one of the best features that we're utilizing this data for going forward is showcasing the faculty work in terms of publications and scholarly contributions, again, whatever that may be. So leveling that playing field where we have medical doctors with their publications and their work also on the same level as any kind of creative productions that our faculty are doing. And so that will be public facing, and kind of speaking to what Jonathan was bringing up, the social impact, especially when you have something public facing like this, will just be much more easily accessible to those outside of the institution in terms of figuring out what really good work that would do and hopefully impact society in a really positive way.
Thank you. For our final question, we want to talk a little bit about the implications of impact tracking. Start us off.
Sure. So in terms of impact tracking, again, I know I sound redundant, but it really is just very important and a backbone at the University of Toledo. We really want to maximize faculty time, and we're asking them to utilize this software and system that can take a while. It can take a while to upload all of the information that's in a traditional CV into another system. So knowing that we are asking them to take that time, we're really trying to make the most of that, be as impactful as possible. And so we're going to try and find really creative ways that they weren't even sure about to utilize the information in time. Again, that public-facing scholarly database, and then you can even extract all of the information that's been loaded within or without time parameters and share that out freely if the faculty member wants to do that. They instead of combining a traditional paper or Dropbox, it's just easy to utilize that information that they've already taken their time to do.
Thanks. And are you guys using the information you're tracking as part of your P&T processes as well?
We are. That has been kind of the biggest culture change. And that is the group that we started rolling this out to 5 years ago. And we've been really kind of thoughtful in terms of loading it out and expanding the groups in the future. But the promotion and tenure was the first group of faculty that utilized this. And they really did need to kind of scramble, for lack of a better word, in terms of entering their information to prepare their dossiers. But it went well, and they found it helpful, and really importantly, the evaluators along the way found it really helpful too. And so we've increased the size of who's utilizing that. So now that the entire institution is hopefully utilizing it to the best of their ability.
Wonderful. Jonathan, what are your thoughts on the kind of implications of impact tracking?
So, Lauren, it won't surprise you to hear me say that I think we got to define what we mean by impact again. And to differentiate between that sort of academic impact, which is really about the operations of the faculty and the institution, and that societal contribution. And if we are looking at supporting institutional goals, and you believe that universities and higher education institutions have a social purpose that goes beyond the internal academic working and being of those institutions, then you have to track those societal impacts as well as the academic impacts. It's not an either or, it's an addition to. And my worry is that we are unbalanced at the present time. So we put too much emphasis on stuff that is relatively easy to measure, papers, grants, citations, books, and what have you. And we don't put enough emphasis on what is hard to measure, but in terms of the social purpose of a higher education institution should be at least as important as that contribution to knowledge and that contribution to teaching. So the real question then is, how do you do that and what the implications of doing that? And as Elissa's made absolutely clear, the first thing is to do it in as efficient way as possible. Collect data once, don't collect it from multiple sources, make sure it's good quality data and data that you can use. When you start to look at the societal impact, there are tools emerging in the marketplace for tracking that. Interfolio recently acquired Research Fish in the UK, which tracks the social impact of all research grants coming from the major government funders, the equivalent of the NIH and the NSF in the US. And that is a massive step forward in the right direction. But the really interesting question is the cultural impacts that then has on the academy and on faculty. So if we start to track those societal impacts, we start to include them in those dossiers for recruitment and promotion and tenure, then we will start to change the cultures, behaviors, and values of faculty, and through that, institutions. And by so doing, we should be supporting institutional goals of universities, which must be to impact on the social good. And my final comment on that is, and I make this comment many, many times, at the end of the day, it is the faculty who are sitting on those recruitment panels. It is the faculty that are sitting on those promotion panels, and it's the faculty that are sitting on their tenure panels. So it is in the gift of those faculty to ask to see what sort of societal impact you have had and use that information as part of the decision-making process. If we do that, then I think we end up in a very interesting space about rediscovering, if you like, the social purpose of higher education and critically strengthening that social contract between universities and broader society.
No, I agree. I'm intrigued to see where it goes in the future as we kind of move more into that next stage of tracking, not just the publication, but what the impact of the publication was.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point, and we need to make sure that we really understand what sort of impacts general society is interested in, not the impacts we are as a scholarly community. And that means listening and active listening.
Thank you so much. We have 2 additional resources for anybody who has attended that you can find at interfolio.com/expert-finder. The first is a white paper about data governance and faculty affairs. And the second is a informational white paper about the faculty information system. Thank you both so much for participating in this panel and sharing your thoughts and activities, as well as thank you all for attending our panel.
Thank you, Lauren. And Jonathan.
Yeah, thank you both.
Yeah, that was really interesting. It's interesting that idea of social impact and social engagement for faculty is a really big topic at Texas A&M, and it's so hard to measure. And faculty have really hard time collecting that story. And we are implementing Interfolio right at this second. So I'd be really quick, Elissa, do you have any recommendations for don't go down this road for this?
I think that Bruce, you and I could meet quite often.
I need drink.
And I would have loved to have somebody to pick my brain. When we were implementing, we learned a whole lot, but being agile is the best thing you can do, and just remembering what you're focusing on. But I would absolutely be happy to help.
It's education of faculty, right? Isn't that it?
It's a tough culture, but hey, we're all in it, right?
That was good. It was a really good talk, and Lauren, very nice job moderating the talk. Good job. Great. Well, we have less than 1 minute to start our next speaker, so thank you very much, and let's move on. Give me there you are. Great. Our next speakers are Davina Erasmus from Elsevier and Jan Fransen from the University of Minnesota. And Jan is, of course, not suffering through the lingering effects of any winter. She is enjoying life near the beach in California. So I'm gonna talk over this whole talk the whole time. I'm gonna probably delete it. I don't know.
Thanks, Bruce.
So go right ahead and start.
Thanks so much, Bruce. So Fransen from the University of Minnesota. In a minute, I'll let Davina introduce herself. I'm just going to talk for a couple minutes about the university and a little bit about what I do there. I'm the service lead for Research Information Management Systems, which means I'm the lead administrator for our Experts at Minnesota system, our portal that faces out to the world, which is built on the Pure platform. So I'll set the stage a little bit. This is just a little bit about the University of Minnesota. We are a land-grant institution, and like most land-grant universities, we're now a large research institution. We're spread across the state, 5 campuses. The University of Minnesota Twin Cities, where I normally am, is located on the traditional ancestral and contemporary lands of the Dakota people, and the other campuses are also on ancestral contemporary lands of Native peoples. We are just adopting a new strategic plan with 5 pillars, and we're working on the specific goals and actions that go with each of these pillars and how we're going to measure the progress. I've been particularly focused on this one, serving the Minnesota and impacting the world. And yeah, intersections is starting to sound like a real word to me now after hearing it so many times. We're looking at, with this, where it's encapsulated as inspired by Minnesota to improve people and places at world-class levels. So it has 3 goals. I'm particularly focused on the one that's in bold. We're now looking at the action items that are associated and looking at the possibilities for research information to evaluate the progress that's scattered across the goals and the actions in the 5 pillars. So demonstrating state and worldwide leadership in sustainability and environmental teaching, research, and convening power. That one refers to environmental goals, but there's language like that throughout, referring to the agribusiness, agriculture, health, and so on. So these goals and action items, they just happen to have a nice, a good fit with a much bigger plan, and that's the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So those look like this. I'm not going to talk a lot about them, but the UN SDGs, which most of you may be familiar with, were adopted by the United Nations in 2015. But they didn't really come to my attention until this year, and now they are everywhere. I'm not going to talk, as I said, in any great detail, but I'll say a couple of things that I think makes them compelling to people on our campus. Most researchers can see themselves somewhere in these goals, regardless of the discipline, and they also emphasize local acts that contribute to the global goals. Administrative, there's another compelling aspect. There's at least one well-defined exercise that can be used to evaluate our goals. We're focusing on the Times Higher Ed World University Ranking, and this is a screenshot from their methodology document. It's showing a portion of how they evaluate one of the 17 goals. Each of the first 16 has a section like this. 27% of the assessment of the goal is based on, the easy stuff, the publications. And the evaluation is based on Scopus data. Oops, sorry. There we go. It's based on Scopus data and also based on complicated queries like this one within Scopus. They published these queries, the Scopus queries. You can find them using those bit.ly links that are listed on the slide to see exactly what the query string is within Scopus to bring up those publications. Okay, so now that brings us to Experts at Minnesota. This is our portal at experts.umn.edu. On this overview page, you'll see a couple of different canned searches. This first one here in the banner section launches a search on the terms that we specify. When the feature was first launched by Elsevier last summer, the out-of-the-box configuration was COVID-19, a COVID-19 search. And that was certainly welcome for an institution like ours that has a large health sciences presence. But we decided to change it last June as we all wrestled with the consequences of the actions of Derek Chauvin and his fellow officers just a few miles from our campus. I was working with a university-wide group organized around SDG metrics, where we asked to use the RIM data to generate a list of people and research outputs related to each of the SDGs as we looked at possibly forming up teams to concentrate on these efforts. I created those databases for internal use, but I thought they'd also be useful for showing off our work on all the SDGs publicly in our portal. So with the help of Farah Karimi, our pure customer consultant, we built another feature that relied on those search strings that were developed for Scopus. We had the icons on our homepage. You could click on one, it would launch a search. You would see all the publications and the people that were associated with that SDG, at least according to the search string that we had plugged in. And it worked great most of the time. But Those are very long search strings, and they go into the URL. And if it got too long, the browser just failed to process it. So it wasn't exactly ideal. It was helpful, but not exactly the behavior we were looking for. So luckily, Elsevier thought it was a good idea too. And just a couple of weeks ago, we were able to scrap our old method in favor of a much nicer version. Davina is going to talk more about that in a couple of minutes, what's happening behind the scenes. Now, the SDGs are really just one example of something we're seeing a lot more of on campus, using the data we've collected for experts at Minnesota to feed other websites. This is one example. I mentioned the Indigenous peoples of Minnesota. We do a significant amount of research involving wild rice at the university. And wild rice is a vitally important role. It has an important role in the lives of the Indigenous people of Minnesota. So the opinions about what can and should be done with wild rice and how that balances with academic freedom at the university, you could say they're diverse, to say the least. So this website its goal is transparency, bringing together the wild rice research using a widget that we developed that pulls information, pulls publication lists from experts at Minnesota. To get the publications we wanted into the list, we needed to leverage the data structure that was available to us through Pure. In this case, we added wild rice as an organization, just like a department or a college. But we're not really crazy about that, since wild rice research isn't really an organization in the same way a college or a department is. But it does work and gives us the effect that we want. We figured out a different way to implement a similar solution a couple of months ago for the water network, which is a new community that's formed up at the university that goes across all 5 campuses. Anybody in the university community who does anything with water can join. They email, the email comes to us as well as someone who adds them to a mailing list. And we add a keyword to their Experts at Minnesota profile saying this person's part of the water network. And then our widget pulls those people and also their recent publications into the water network website, separate again from the Experts at Minnesota website. It happens really in just the same way, the same kind of solution that Elsevier is using for tagging people in the publications. So those are a couple of examples that happen to use different websites that are populating from Experts at Minnesota. But we have lots of different research areas that don't necessarily have their own website, but would still benefit from a way to highlight what's going on using Experts at Minnesota. So I'm going to turn the stage over to Davina now to tell you more about the product behind Experts at Minnesota and how it's evolving to meet the needs of us, their customers.
Thanks, Jen. Hi, everyone. I just wanted to quickly add to what Jen was telling you about the work that she's been doing, just to kind of give you a feeling of how we've been helping and also how we've been very interestedly watching what she's been doing and hooking into things that she's been doing as well. But just before we go into there, I just wanted to give you a few facts about Pure. So our product is actually 18 years old. So we've been doing this for actually quite a long time. We have almost 300 customers over more than 40 countries. And that means that we get a lot of different voices telling us about what's going on and how they'd like to use the product and how they want to be able to showcase persons in their institution or showcase experts across the world as well. We have 11 user groups, again, pointing to how many voices we have in this discussion. But it's always wonderful to have these conversations with customers and to also have the feeling of being able to add to their success. There's more than 32 content types in Pure. And by that, I mean the different entities that you use to represent research. That can be anything from researchers to institutions to equipment and facilities. It's all the different parts that form one big picture around the research that an institution does. And so it's really important to us to make sure that we have the right pieces in the box to ensure that we get the full picture into Pure. The Pure backend, or the place where everyone's actually managing their content, has been translated into 14 different languages, and our portal is translated into 23 different languages, which gives our customers also the ability to the target audience in the right language. I put in a very small image there of just how we think about the product and how we build the product out. In different markets, it's called different things, Research Information Management System, CRIS, RMS. But actually, we basically take a look at whatever our customers are telling us they need to be able to fulfill their use cases that fit into one of those 5 bubbles there. So being able to manage the data quality and processes to be able to build a narrative, tell research stories, and collaborate, basically. And we use those 5 nodes to ensure that we're looking at everything that we're talking with our customers about from those different angles as well. If you can click through, please, Jan. So the one thing that we do, we like numbers. One of the numbers that's really important to us in Pure is the number 5, and that's because we have this moniker that we use that is the 5 C's of data quality. And this is basically 5 terms that we use as our way of understanding what we need to do, what our customers need to do to ensure that they've got the full and correct picture that they can use to take other actions and to be able to showcase and ensure that they're making the right steps as well. So the 5 C's very quickly are complete, correct, connected, current, and compliant. So it's really about having a complete set of your data, that the data is correct, that the data is interconnected or connected to each other, just meaning that those different content types are related to each other and they're not just individual pieces of content sitting in the database. The data is always current, so we're always checking to see if there's updates we can be making to the content, and that it's compliant. In different situations, it's necessary to have specific content in that is also then compliant for funder needs or for assessment purposes or evaluation purposes. If you can click through, please. So in this discussion with Jan and the discussion around SDGs and what we've been doing, I think the number one word that I thought was important to highlight here was the idea of connected, because connected content allows you to have and to use different lenses. And that's actually at the essence of what was being used by Jan in her building out the SDG piece, and also that we've been using in building it out, but also what Jan's using in the wild rice discussion, as well as the water networks. Actually, it's very interesting to get into the conversation with our customers around using the connected content pieces, because we do have the different connections to different parts of the research information. We have conversations with customers around things like being able to showcase the researchers and the research that's connected to a specific prestigious journal, as an example. And then they decide to maybe use that slice or that lens in being able to profile their content in their portal and make sure that they're bringing out the right focus on the content as they want to and as is important in their regions. If you can click through, please, Jan. So we were talking about SDGs for a while, for about 2 or 3 years. Sorry, I think you can probably hear the dog. For about 2 or 3 years, and we were trying to work out, when would this concept become important to our customers, and when would it become important for us to be able to bring the functionality in place for our customers to be able to manage their SDGs. At that time, as we started to get into this, last year, we started to hear that Jan was experimenting with this and was trying to work out how to bring SDGs to the fore in her portal as well. And so we started to watch what Jan was doing and try to understand what's important then in the SDG discussion. And we've been using some of what she's been doing in some of what we've been building as well, just trying to make sure that, the things that we build are actually completely practical and applicable to what customers want to be able to do, especially in telling the impact story around the impact of the research and the researchers in specific social fields as well. So if you can click through, please. So really the question is, why would you want to do SDGs? I think it's very, very clear, especially when you're talking about expert forums, is that you want to be able to show the impact of your research in specific areas, especially something as noble as the SDGs, but you also want to be able to be found for that. You want your researchers to be found for those topics. You want the research to be found, and also departments, projects, and things that are going on at the institution. If you can click through. And so we looked at how would we do this? What is it that we need to do? What do we need to put in place to ensure that our customers can get this story and this narrative through? And again, we were looking very much at what Jan was trying to do, and try to understand what is the best and the easiest way for us to facilitate that process. So we did it in 3 steps, basically. We first of all looked at this idea of how do we know what the institution has in the box that would be fitting the bill of SDG, for example, the different SDGs. How do we find that, and then also make sure that it's immediately visible and immediately usable? So we built in some automatic tagging of content, which just allows us to connect those queries that Jan was showing you earlier to a classification keyword set. And that allows us to be able to adjust those queries as they get adjusted and as those are being updated, but also to be able to add other and new queries as we need to, where we're thinking that this kind of conversation is something that will become bigger than SDGs, what might be used in the future in things like strategic areas that you want to be tracking, and so be able to put in queries that represent these things and be able to tag content automatically as well. The second step was to understand where you are, basically. Where do you stand in the process of what content do you have and how much do you have and who's important in these topics? And so we built out some out-of-the-box reporting to help our customers to be able to take the tags that have been added to content and understand exactly who, which departments, how much of content, which content. And what we're building out further is the reporting that is actually in relation to what Jan was showing earlier as well, from the THE, so the world, the higher education ranking, the definitions of what they're also using in terms of how to understand your impact there. So wherever it's practical and applicable to the content that is in Pure, we're building out those reports as well and putting them in the box so that our customers can very quickly get a view of how they stand in conjunction to the definitions that were there. And then the third step here is really about telling your research stories, being able to go out and actually have that content show on the portal and ensure that when a visitor comes to the portal, they can actually find these SDGs and find the related content to it as well. If you can click through, please, Jan. So how that works out is that we looked at 3 main things or 3 main activities when we were looking at the portal. The first one is to allow visitors to browse the portal. So coming in on the homepage, if they do come to the homepage, being able to click on the SDG banners, understand what's there, how much of content, what different kinds of content has been tagged, be able to click through from there to look at specific parts of the content. If you can click through. The second piece we looked at is this question of discovering. So when you're looking at content, so if you had to land on a person's profile or on a specific piece of research output, that you can then click through and go further into the discovery of who else, what else, where else is this institution busy with SDGs as well. So being able to kind of, fortuitously work your way through the site and find more as you go through. And if you can click through again. The last piece is around just being able to target your search. So coming into the website, knowing that you're looking for something specific, knowing that you're looking for people specifically around a topic, being able to filter that down, being able to do the search on the keyword, filter it down, and also understand from the search results, what you're looking at right now, which specific SDGs have been hit. As I say, we're working on expanding this functionality, but we're also very much having conversations with Jan around wild rice and water networks to see how we can build out some of the showcasing of some of these pieces. So using things like organizational units, but a special type of organizational unit to make that showcasing capability better and making it easier there to create those combinations of content and to invite collaboration as well. And that was it. Thank you.
Sorry, my microphone. That was really, really interesting, Davina and Jan. There is, we just started talking about the SDGs here at A&M and using it to help the campus tell its scholarly narrative around, societal impact and the land grant mission. And so it's nice to have you guys paving the way. That is awesome. It's really good. Well, thanks very much. And of course, just remember everybody, once all these talks are done, we're going to bring all the speakers back for questions and discussion. Okay. So thank you, Jan, and thank you, Davina. And let's invite our next speaker's up, and I must tell you guys, this is actually pretty exciting. In my 25 years of working as a faculty member, I've never had the pleasure of introducing myself. I have heard that our next speakers should have won the Nobel Prize already. Can leap tall buildings at single bounds. No, it's so I'm welcoming my co-presenter Martha Golubock from Digital Science and myself, and we're going to talk about how our research information management system supports interdisciplinary. Yes. Thank you, Julia. I think Martha probably deserves a Nobel Prize more than I do.
Thank you. I agree wholeheartedly.
Let me share my screen here and get started, and application window, and there we go. Okay, Martha, take it away. And let's do slideshow.
Okay.
Great.
Welcome. Welcome to Supporting Interdisciplinary Research at Texas A&M. Bruce just introduced himself, but I am here with Dr. Bruce Herbert, who is the director of the Office of Scholarly Communication at Texas A&M. And can I go?
You want the next
yes,
slide?
Please. I'm sorry. I'm depending on you.
I'm
sorry.
Yes.
I am the solutions manager for digital science, and I represent 5 of our portfolios. I represent Dimensions, Altmetric, Figshare, Symplectic, and one of our new ones, which is Repeta. Next slide, please. And so 3 of those, we have been working closely with Texas A&M to support their Scholars at TAMU project. And so just a little bit of background. So Symplectic Elements is a faculty data management system that harvests data from multiple data sources across an institution. And then in turn can use that data or reuse that data to populate downstream systems like Vivo or Scholars at TAMU. Next screen, please.
Yep.
No, you didn't. No, this is good.
Did I?
So having said that, we have been working with Bruce since 2015 to take that data, to populate his Scholars at TAMU with disambiguated and deduplicated data and then more importantly, these are some of the other examples of Vivo sites supported by Symplectic. But we have taken all of that data that's aggregated, deduplicated, and disambiguated, and then push it into systems like these. And in turn, next slide, please.
I
yes.
think it's my
slide. No, the next one.
So.
Oh, it is your slide. Yes, I need it. Oh, wait, okay,
great.
Never mind. I was just going to say that in turn, there was one more slide that I actually used of Bruce's that was actually included in this slide deck. And what I wanted to say was that not only has TAMU adopted elements to help populate their Scholars at TAMU, but they've also adopted 2 more tools. One is Altmetric that has helped them to show impact and tracking mentions across what TAMU's research is doing. They've also adopted Dimensions, which Bruce is going to talk about. And Dimensions is a discovery database, and it also houses multiple data sources across Dimensions. But in turn, it also has a categorization scheme, multiple categorization schemes that are in the background there. STG codes are one of them, FOR codes are another. But Bruce's team is looking to understand the types of research that are going on across TAMU. So with Elements, that is pulling the data in, with Altmetric that is tracking the attention for those outputs, and then with Dimensions, which they're understanding the types of research that is actually going on across TAMU. Bruce is using that for his interdisciplinary research project, which he is going to talk about now.
Outstanding. Thank you, Martha. I think I know what I did.
It was actually your slides, nonetheless.
Sorry. But Texas A&M has been involved in the last couple of years at really trying to build interdisciplinary research teams across campus in order to have important, impactful research that both advances our knowledge, but also builds our societal impact and engagement with grand challenges facing both Texas and the world. And this interdisciplinary research is really has exploded since the building the internet, and you can see large initiatives at funding agencies like NIH and NSF around those kinds of initiatives. So we saw interdisciplinary research as one of the major outcomes that we wanted to support with our research information system called Scholars at Texas A&M. Interdisciplinary research, of course, brings other benefits to campus, including scholarly reputation. You can see here the growth of interdisciplinary research over time, these large interdisciplinary research teams, and the relative citation advantage that these teams generally generate through the research that they do. And of course, it extends through almost all disciplines on campus. And so we thought about how our RIM system could help move the needle at Texas A&M. So if you unpack support for interdisciplinary research and how a system like Scholars at Texas A&M, which incorporates a number of digital science modules and systems, and is built around the open source software system called Vivo. There are several different ways that our system could support interdisciplinary research at an institution as large as Texas A&M. And of course, for many faculty, they are focused on the profile that our system provides. You can see my profile there in our Scholars system. And this, of course, signals reputation. It signals expertise. It provides evidence of my productivity over time, and so on. All the characteristics that, if somebody was interested in collaborating with me, might be interested in learning and discovering. Of course, our system and RIM systems and CRIS systems often support discoverable expertise. We are seeing a transition from using web pages to these more integrated and specific RIM systems, so that you can discover expertise across the institution in a much easier way than just thumbing through different departments and web pages. One of the outcomes that, of course, the RIM systems themselves represent authoritative data that can be used for reporting for collaborative teams. In particular, we have found that centers and institutes and other large collaborations have really embraced the use of Scholars and its reporting ability in terms of supporting those centers and institutes' activities. And then finally, probably the most exciting thing on campus is the use of that authoritative data for research intelligence work, where we are trying to understand the strengths and gaps of research on campus, its impact across both academic fields and society at large, and how we might use research intelligence to support strategic decision-making, or rather the use of local funds to support interdisciplinary research. So if you look at our Scholars at Texas A&M system, you'll see that it's based around Vivo, but we've incorporated a number of different both homegrown and digital science tools, including, as Martha said, altmetrics and dimensions and symplectic elements. We use symplectic elements to harvest our publication data. When we looked at the economics of either buying a subscription to symplectic elements or building a similar tool ourselves, it was obvious that symplectic elements was going to save us money in two ways. We couldn't build an equivalent tool for cheaper than the subscription cost. But the other thing that we really like about symplectic elements is that because the tool works. It's easy to use and so on. That we don't need too many people to run Scholars at Texas A&M. So we have one data analyst who collects all the data for all 4,000, 5,000 faculty members that are represented in Scholars at Texas A&M. Faculty have the ability to input and interact with their profiles through a homegrown profile editor, which is also drawing data from symplectic elements. And that goes into a SQL database, which is the basis for our custom reporting system, and then into our graph database, which is represented by the Vivo middleware system. And a big part of our data reuse across campus is the API that's available through that middleware system. And then finally, the Vivo Scholar is the profile editor, the external facing part of the system. And in that profile, we have embedded metrics around our publications from both altmetrics and dimensions, such that you can, those profiles include those metrics on the faculty's pages, which they really appreciate. So it's an interesting, complex system, but one of the benefits that we have found in working with digital science is the openness of their systems allows us to integrate their tools within our custom design system. We have emerging and interesting needs on campus, and we're trying to respond to them in an agile way. And we find this openness, the quality of the data and their APIs and so on, really allow us to build our system fairly quickly in a responsive manner. So we appreciate that. Some of the features that we've embedded in our system recently, that we've added to our system recently that has directly supported interdisciplinary research on campus is a faceted search system, and where you can go through and really kind of dig down into the data and find the people that you want. And then the other red arrow where users can export those search results in a simple CSV type table. And we find that organizations like centers and institutes are using this constantly to extract data from our system for whatever reason that they need. The other major feature that we've built into our system is our ability to harvest data from harvest metadata from our own institutional repository. We're running DSpace, another Lyrasis open source system, as our institutional repository. Faculty are using this as a publishing platform where they are adding non-peer reviewed documents like reports or information sheets or edited volumes that might be really appropriate for society. They also have ETDs, that are electronic theses and dissertations, and all of those publications that faculty are adding to our institutional repository get represented in faculty's profiles in Scholars at Texas A&M. And of course, it also gets listed in their Google Scholar page. What's interesting is we have added then metrics to our institutional repository, so that alt metrics in particular are collected for those documents. And this has driven a really interesting use case for pandemic publishing as faculty transition to working at home. They utilize this system in a really kind of unique ways to do some unique things responding to the pandemic over the last year. So one of the strategies we use in building our Scholars at Texas A&M is we try to be a little bit brutal with ourselves. We collect data on that helps us evaluate the project. Our users, our stakeholders, our campus and community members, are they satisfied? Are they using the system? Is our system enabling them to do new things that benefit their career and enhance the impact of their work around campus? And are we having an organizational impact? And we essentially adopted an agile development cycle where we constantly are collecting this information. and using it to drive future development of our system. And this formal evidence has really led to useful insights on where our system needed to be improved. And in large part, I think that's helped us succeed. The central concept that we use, of course, is scholars at Texas A&M represent a socio-technical system. And so we are very focused on how people are using it more than anything else. And so are we meeting their needs? So the first thing that data that we started collecting is how many faculty logged into the system and updated their profile. And I'm pretty excited to report that we are above 80% of all faculty at Texas A&M have updated their profile. We have found wide buy-in across A&M for scholars at Texas A&M. So that it has become integrated with their workflows and their use. And probably one of the best examples of outcomes of that buy-in is the introduction or implementation of Interfolio for faculty annual evaluations recently at Texas A&M, where the faculty senate demanded of the administration that Interfolio work with us in the library so that we could push data from scholars into the Interfolio system. And so we're doing that now. But one of the best stories I have is when I mentioned the faculty engagement to our vice president of research recently. He looked at me and he just was kind of a little dumbfounded because he goes, I couldn't get 50% of the faculty to agree the sky's blue on a clear day. And so we're pretty proud of this. We have recently, Texas A&M has used internal funding to drive the formation of new interdisciplinary research teams across campus in a new program called the Triad and X Grant program. Texas A&M has dropped about $100 million into this program. And one of the activities that we tracked was usage of our system during due dates for this internal grant funding opportunity for faculty. And what we saw was that we did have large amounts of usage around when the proposals were due, and in particular when that title was due, because when the title was due, you also had to tell Texas A&M who your team was. And so we saw a large amount of, a lot of activity driving the use of scholars at Texas A&M during those due dates. And of course, faculty waited to the last minute, which is pretty classic. Interestingly enough, in many cases, when we are tracking what search terms and how faculty are searching through scholars at or users are searching through scholars at Texas A&M. And it still dominates people searching for people by name. And of course, we are not accounting for how many people are searching for themselves here in this data. But we are seeing a large portion of the usage of our systems around concepts, where some users are going in with particular search terms like cancer or water. We wouldn't do wild rice, but other top terms like that. And they're trying to find expertise in those areas. So evidence that the system is working as intended. This is a quick example of outcomes for research intelligence in our system. We have been asked for help. On my team in the library has been asked for help from faculty putting together large NIH and NSF proposals where they have to have large communities. And this is probably our best example of a system of a research intelligence visualization work where we combined both publication data with local data that would only have been collected in our scholars at Texas A&M system. So these faculty are putting in for an NIH, they put in for an NIH training grant that was trying to build collaborative teams from the College of Medicine and the College of Engineering. And the proposal, the program officer at NIH asked the PIs for evidence that the PIs had formed a real partnership. So the PIs came to us for visualizations, and we started with a co-authorship network. And on the left-hand side, and as you can see, there was really no evidence from publications that these groups of faculty were really collaborating very closely together. So what we did is we hypothesized that in fact there hadn't been enough time for the faculty to publish yet. And so what we did is we extracted data on the committee membership of our PhD students that were part of the NIH training program. And that's the visualization on the right-hand side. So we couple co-authorship and co-mentorship data. We could build a much stronger network of and showing that the groups that were collaborating. The PIs attributed this visualization to the funding. It was a $3.2 million grant. And we've been part of about over $10 million of successful funding on campus, giving us a pretty good return on investment for the cost of building scholars itself. And so with that, maybe we'll save questions later till we get to the group together. But in general, Scholars at Texas A&M has been successful across campus. We're getting buy-in from both faculty and upper administration. We're empowering new uses across campus in new ways. And we do appreciate our partnership with digital science because of the quality of the tools and a lot of how you designed them, which made it easy for us to build our custom system. Thank you, Martha. Very good. And we're 2 minutes over. So Bruce does like to talk, doesn't he? You know, that moderator should have cut him off. It's still a little weird. Okay, maybe I could invite all the panelists who are still with us to come back. And I'm going to, let's see. Yes, there we go. Jan's back. And very good. And join us back. And let's see if anybody has, thanks, Davina. Anybody has questions? Please help me out and put something in the Q&A. And I'm gonna really lean on Rebecca Bryant to ask something to help her OCL report. Or DJ maybe. But yeah, that's it. I should lean on my team member who's only an associate professor, right? That's good. It's very good. The Jan, what you obviously have a successful partnership with Elsevier. What do you think of some of the reasons?
You know what? I think that that is a perfect question, Bruce, because I was thinking leading up to this, you know, what is really key, I think, for any RIM implementation, whether it's experts finders and whether you're doing it as an open source thing where you're really trying to customize it yourself, or when you're working with a vendor, I think it is key to be working with the vendors and telling them this is what we need. Pure had been around for a long time before we ever got it in the US. It was built for very different use cases than what we in North America tend to be using. And I think my advice working in a system like this is if you're working with a vendor, be sure you're telling them what you need and not just sitting back and waiting to see what they offer, because it may not be a good fit. And the only way you get a good fit is by complaining, right, Davina? I do a lot of that.
So be a New Yorker, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's hard for us Minnesotans, but we do it better in print. So, you know, filing those JIRA tickets, that's how I do it.
Awesome. We actually, Davina, do you want to talk about, or how about Martha? Martha, why don't you talk about how do you find, what do companies need to do to be good partners with universities? Certainly, you guys have been.
Well, I mean, I hope from Jan's perspective that you don't do a whole lot of complaining, Bruce. I haven't heard one, but I think it is important to at least have the options. I mean, we have, you know, as an as a vendor, and we provide the, I think, at least from a digital science perspective, we provide quality products, but it doesn't mean that we can't change. And I think we focus on the fact that we are very flexible, that we provide solutions that can be used downstream, not just in the solutions that they provide, that we have very powerful APIs so that you can use it for different systems. Jan, we have just recently implemented SDGs in our dimensions discovery solution because it is very important, and all kinds of institutions are interested in those types of categorization and how they stand up against other institutions, for that matter, in those particular areas. It's important for funding. But I think to your question, Bruce, is that I think we, as a vendor, we try to be as flexible as possible. I'm hoping that we provide lots of information across all of the portfolios that are valuable, but also welcome changes or customizations across them, because I think vendors have to grow with the needs of our clients.
Davina, do you find American institutions dramatically different in any interesting way from other institutions? Elsevier, of course, is working with partners across the globe, so are we weird?
No, I don't think so. I think what's interesting is that I think every region has their nuances, but eventually what you find is the majority of the functionality that's needed is very similar. And actually, that's what I was thinking as you were answering as well, Martha, is that we can't try to produce a product that absolutely fits everybody's need, but what we try to do is put in the functionality in a certain way and make it as configurable and adjustable as possible, so everyone can try to add in their own nuances to the system. And then we also really try to look at what our customers are doing with it, right? And when we see a customer doing something like Jan has been doing, we've got some discussions going with different customers in different regions. We try to connect people as well in these conversations and see if that's resonating with other regions and things like that. So in general, what we're seeing is that, again, there might be some nuances, but there's mainly the same needs in terms of being able to showcase and stuff.
Oh, that's awesome. That what you just said leads exactly very well segue to we have good questions in the Q&A. Jan, the first one's for you, and it's from Rebecca. Thank you, Rebecca. Appreciate that. Didn't mean to put you on the spot. Yeah, I did. It's life. Jan, do you have any sense of how others on campus are using the SDG reports that you're generating? Like what is the campus
the big
impact?
thing? There are a couple of places. One is, as I mentioned in the presentation, it's explicitly part of our strategic planning, the actions, the metrics that we're using. One of the actions that we're looking at is setting up SDG teams so that we can better see across the whole campus what's happening in this area. And we'll probably start with just doing like 3 to start out. In fact, I know we will. We'll start with 3. And kind of expand from there and try to pull together different kinds of expertise, not just researchers, but also, for example, if we're talking about zero hunger, pulling in the people who are working with students who are in food unstable situations, or other things like that, things that are more related to our sustainability goals for the physical campus, for example, in addition to the researchers themselves. So making sure that we get a broad cross-section of voices at the table as we look at these SDGs from a Minnesota perspective. That is probably the biggest, those two sort of go together. One is just okay, we're going to use some metrics because it's a strategic plan, we have to have that. But also just looking broadly at ourselves as a large system that is spread across the state, and just being able to see who you have things in common with, or who can do something that you need to get done. The interdisciplinary teams that you were talking about, Bruce, it's just another lens for looking for your next collaborator.
All right, that's great. We got a bunch of other questions, and anybody can answer this. I met Scott Woods over in the little coffee table rooms before, but I had mentioned that I found it would really help Texas A&M if the library could help other systems on campus use a common ontology or data model so that our data is more interoperable. And certainly, as we work with Interfolio, that was one of the things that came up. Is Interfolio was using one data model, and our RIM system was using another one, and so we had to crosswalk the data rather carefully. And we're still working out the issues there. But Jan, have you noticed that at all on campus? Has anybody approached your team to talk about data models and ontology for universities?
Not directly within the university. I think that we have seen the same thing as you. I think there's another question in here about promotion and tenure systems, and we have we have digital measures activity insights on our campus, but we are it rolls out one college, one department at a time. It is not the entire university is not using it. But every time somebody new comes up on it, of course they say, well, how come I have to type all this stuff in all over again? Or if they have used that, we don't get this much anymore now that Experts has been around for a while. But if they've been using that system, we brand it Works, why can't you bring the Work stuff over to Experts at Minnesota? And we can, but man, it's a lot of work because they are not the same. It is almost there's no way to really truly automate it. It's you almost do just as good a job with copy paste with two screens open, because the data models just do not match. And that does not make sense to people who have not looked at the data. They figure it's the same thing. So
no. Yeah, they're not happy about that. I can tell you that. It's certainly. How about Jan? I'll talk after you. How is your Expert at Minnesota used in your?
That is it. We're not used in tenure and promotion, at least not directly. People will take data from Minnesota and feed it into another system. We have, particularly our medical school does that. They have their own system, which we helped develop years ago. That is really for that. And it is set up so that they do a nightly download, bringing data over to their system for publications, for H-index, things like that are important to them. But they are very different from others on campus, and it would not be a one-size-fits-all. Again, we share data when we can, and I think this is probably true of you and at Texas A&M as well. We have kind of a firewall between the two. We don't really want, as the libraries, we don't really want to be seen as evaluating people. We would rather show the world how awesome they are and help them to do that. So I don't see that necessarily as a bad thing. I wish the data sharing were easier, but other than that, I'm fine having them be two separate efforts.
Yeah, we do the exact same thing at A&M. Very early on, we made a conscious decision that the library was not going to be an evaluation organization because we just can't. But what I can do at A&M is build a system that empowers people to tell their narrative, that collects metrics that help justify that narrative, that gives them new ways to share their work with the world. So a great example is tomorrow at this time, exactly, I'm meeting with the School of Public Health, and they want to know about two things. They want to know about altmetrics and how they can use altmetrics, and they want to know how they can use our repository to publish documents that are not necessarily peer-reviewed, that are meant to be shared with practitioners around the state, because that college has a value of the translation of their research to improve public health here in Texas. And so our tools, our systems, our expertise is empowering the faculty to tell a better story. We don't see it as a benchmarking tool. It's more of a narrative tool, making help their digital identity and so on. Great. We're 5 minutes over, so let's see if we can get through the two more questions. Are you seeing collaborations within institutions, between U.S. institutions, between institutions in different countries? Why do you think that is? Certainly, the Vivo community is an open source community that's organized by Lyricist, which is a nonprofit organization. And there we have community members that are from all across the world, South America and Central America, Europe and United States, and some parts of Asia. And there we are collaborating around the development of our software system and best practices and ontologies and things like that. I don't know, Jan, do you have kind of anything to say?
Yeah, just thinking about it in those terms, certainly the voice of a group that all uses the same product from the same vendor is an important collaboration. And certainly I've made a lot of connections and benefited from a lot of connections from my colleagues who use Pure at other institutions, both in the US and around the world. Both by asking Elsevier, could you add this feature, or could this be different? But also very much from just seeing examples of what others are doing and learning from them. And actually, much like has happened here, there have been several presentations over the last 5 weeks where I've made notes of, okay, I think that's something that we could do that I really hadn't thought of before. So if that's the kind of collaboration that the question is addressing, I think very much we're seeing that. I happen to be collaborating on an actual research project that will result in an actual report, maybe look for it around August. Working with OCLC Research, and Rebecca Bryant is my co-PI on that. And one of our case studies is, of course, Texas A&M. So Bruce and I have seen a lot of lately.
Yes.
And
yeah, you're going to be that outlier
right.
point, you know. As we used to say in geochemistry, 2 points is a straight line, 3 points is chaos.
I think that's going to be a really good encapsulation of how we can all learn from each other.
Right. Very good. We've got a last question, and then I'll ask Martha and Davina to any last comments that they want to make. But a question from Matt, and Matt's interested in how the Interfolio implementation is going at Texas A&M. We don't know right now. We haven't heard from them in a while. Interfolio is being implemented by the provost office. We are helping them by pushing data from scholars into Interfolio. It was a demand of the faculty senate, which was pretty exciting. The challenge, and we can do this, we can help make it easy for them and so on like that, but they have a small team and they're busy. So we'll hear from them, when we do. It is interesting on campus. Our faculty, I can see, are confusing Interfolio and scholars at Texas A&M a little bit, and they think we control Interfolio. And so I have Don June and I, my colleague who's here, we have a meeting with nuclear engineering next Friday, because the faculty want to know why isn't their profile being pushed to Interfolio, and I'm going to just get up and say I don't control it. So it's hard. But Davina, do you have any last words? Anything you want to some synthesis of all the talks we've seen so far?
Well, no, I think the only thing I would say is that the topic of interoperability is actually a really important one for everyone. My team and I have been doing some research and some investigating into this, because we were trying to work out how do we maybe start becoming a part of the solution to this, because I think with the other vendors as well, we're all very focused on making sure there's APIs and it's open and you can get things in and out of the system. But what we're finding is the problem is not so much the question of whether you can use APIs to do this. It's exactly that question of data models. And there's a thing that needs to be answered there around whether we can all agree on one format, one set of this is how research data looks, so that we can actually be truly interoperable in that way. Because everybody's got different unique selling points and things like that. It's not about that. It's more about how much more you can do when you've got a complete picture, and what you can do with that complete picture as well.
Outstanding. Yeah, that's great. Martha?
I was just going I was just going to comment on Jan's use case and case study around SDGs. I think it's amazing. And while, we've implemented SDG codes in our tools as well, it is really nice to actually see a case study that is so specific around how important they are. We create reports and things like that around them and how your institution looks from an SDG perspective. But your use case is amazing, and I'm actually going to go back into our tools and actually take a look at brown rice and all the institutes out there that are actually collaborating with one another, because collaboration is amazing. And I think the more vendors like us start creating these categorizations. Bruce is using, FOR codes, so fields of research codes, to understand what's going on at TAMU, but SDG codes that you all are using. A lot of institutions, like medical institutions, are using, RCD codes, but I think it's really important to actually understand what institutions, what particular areas you guys are focused on, so we can actually collaborate more, be more connected with one another. I was really moved by your story.
Yeah, that's great. It was a good story, Jan. Okay, well, I want to thank all the speakers today. I thought the talks were really, really good. We had a really good participation, which is also neat. They wanted me to tell people, feel free to go back to the small groups tables in Remno. And also the last session of Expert Finders Symposium is next Thursday. Same time, same back channel. So I hope you all join us. But again, thank you very much for all the great talks today.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.